Let's turn this into this. Analog synths, yeah, I've got a couple. There's one right there that you can see. Yeah, let's just turn it off because you're not going to need any of that today. I'm going to show you how to make fire samples like Nico, Baran, those kind of vocal samples that everyone goes crazy for, you know, where he's standing in front of a synth and he's standing in front of pedals and stuff. We got pedals down there, but they ain't going to be turned on. We ain't going to use them today. I'm going to show you how you can do this in the box with soft synths and plugins, and we're going to get into all kinds of tricks, rhythm tricks and arrangement tricks and other things that are going to really help you take your sample game to the next level. So stay tuned. I'm B-Sticks. Go find me on Instagram at B-Sticks Production and let's get into it. So here we are with the theory breakdown now. This is a simple progression, but it's all about how we're going to use it. We're going to elevate it by looking at different ways we can play this later on. But to start with, we're in the key of F major. Now this is nice to sometimes work in a different key. I know I often work in C major. However, F is a nice key to work. It gives you different inspiration points and it's only got one sharp and flat in it as well. So we actually start with our sharp and flat note, which is a B flat or an A sharp. And that is the 4 chord in F major. And we just built a little triad, a major triad here. Sounds pretty boring. However, with one more note, we can turn it into something beautiful. So again, we're going to make a B flat major 7th chord. And to find the major 7th of any chord, we take our root note, we draw a note directly underneath it. We raise that by an octave. Job done. We have our major 7th there, and our second chord is going to be a minor 7th because we're walking down to the 3 chord, and the 3 chord in any diatonic scale is going to be a minor chord. So we build an A minor triad with an A, a C and an E. You've probably seen me build this before as the 6 chord in C major. However, it is the 3 chord in F major. And we're going to add one more note to make this a minor 7th. To find the minor 7th of any chord, you're just going to go to the root note, look at 2 notes underneath, and that's going to be a G in this case, and then we raise that up an octave. Now we've got 2 beautiful chords, which we can actually create loads of tracks or samples out of those 2 chords. We can change the rhythm up, we can change the sounds, we can arpeggiate them, we can strum the chords out. There's so many possibilities we can do there, but we're going to take this a step further. So we're looking at a G minor 7th, which is the 2 chord in F major. We could just take this and just copy it, drop it down by 2 semitones to get a G. Or we could again do a similar thing and just go for our G, build a minor triad with an A sharp, B flat, and a D note, and just add an F on top. And we've got a lovely descending progression. By descending, just going down, and you can hear those top notes really making a big difference to the overall sound. Now we'll take it one step further. We're going to create a 5 chord here, which in F is just a C major chord. We're not using an altered dominant or a dominant chord here, although we could. We're just going to use a very boring C major triad, building it with a C, E and a G. These chords are going to sound really different when we start to move them onto other sounds, and you're going to see loads of techniques and source that I'm about to spill in the next section. So let's jump into the sample itself and see how I applied these. So would you believe that I fully edited this tutorial and then I slept on it and I was like, I'm not giving you enough source. Like, I need to do this again, break it down differently and really explain so that you can understand perfectly how you can recreate these kind of samples. So we're back again, and if you wouldn't mind just liking and subscribing, following me on Instagram, go grab some of my free mini kits. It would mean a lot. I want to make this really easy to understand for you. I'm going to break it down into instruments, vocals, general psychology, and how to think about this. I mean, the psychology stuff is going to be throughout really, because as I explain how I put this together, you're going to kind of like get an insight into my brain and how it's working. So these kind of samples tend to have
a really interesting sound to them overall, which you're like, how does it sound like that? The way that I got mine to sound like this is through Varispeed. And I think there's some kind of speeding up or slowing down of the whole sample, which gives you that either that really deep vocal or that really high pitched vocal. The 4-bats technique is like pitching everything up a little bit. And in Logic, you can do that with the Varispeed function. That's exactly what I did here. So essentially, I programmed the sample in slow and then I sped it up with Varispeed. In speeding it up, the pitch also raised. Now in Logic, you can choose if you want to speed something up by pitch or by time. I chose pitch, and the reason I chose pitch is because I could then choose a solid amount of semitones to raise the whole sample by, in order that it would still be in tune if someone wanted to maybe add some more instruments, or add another vocal and tune it maybe, so it wouldn't be between keys. So look, if I come over here to the Varispeed function in Logic and I put resulting tempo, you can see that by pitching this sample up by 3 semitones to A flat instead of F, it's now 172.435 BPM, almost 172.5. I would rather that than say I was to put this on 180 BPM and my D tune would be like 3.25 semitones or something, which would be really weird between keys. Now there is microtonal stuff which is between keys. They're like people like Jacob Collier and other guys that are on some crazy jazz thing will do. But honestly, the easiest way for me is to do this. And I know in Edison and pitch and time stretching, you can like stretch stuff by semitones. So you want to think about that when you're Varispeeding stuff. Now, I'm going to leave the Varispeed on while I break this down for you, because if I turn it off, everything's going to sound a little bit slow. Well, it's going to sound very slow. Let me just show you. Sounds like the record's like been slowed down, which is an interesting way to kind of approach these samples when you're programming them. But the resulting effect is... I was programming this with my final speed in mind and not with the speed that I put it into. Although there's only a few elements to these samples, you have to take care over each element and make sure that they're all fire, so that the entire production is ear-catching, fire, and just leaves the listener wanting more. The first sound that I went for was in the Sky Keys. Now, these kind of samples are all about sound selection as well. The sound that I went for are in the Sky Keys. These are really high quality samples, but they also sound quite analog as well. So if we look at what I played, it's just the same chords as we went through in the theory breakdown. The only thing that's different is I added this A on this third chord, this G minor, to make it a G minor 9 chord. And then the second time around that I took out that A, and that actually changed the melody slightly. And this is an interesting technique, subtle melody changes. If I play you just this part, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take the processing off of this as well, because we'll come to the processing in a second. But let's just look at what we played here. Four. You can see that this melody goes down at the end, resolves almost. So you can see that I've left a lot of space between all the chords. There's even like a whole bar here, and the cool thing about leaving that space is I can either fill it with something else on another sound and create like a call and response, or I can just leave the space, because space is actually really, really important, and how you use your space is a lesson in itself, and that is like something you're just going to develop over time. The more that you program, the more that samples that you make. I EQ'd some bottom out of that. I added my favorite chorus plugin, Microshift. I put some lossy on, which again is giving us that kind of lo-fi flavor there. And the secret sauce really here is this tremolator plugin. Let's just hear what that does quickly. Can you hear? Whoa, 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 whoa. Tremolo is just like from the Latin word tremble, so it just means like da 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 da. And I really like that kind of wobbly effect that it gave the synth. Everything I'm doing here is, I mentioned the analog synths at the beginning, and Nico's using a Prophet there, he's using a Mellotron, he's using certain analog synths and pedals, and we're just trying to kind of capture the essence of the analog equipment by using certain plugins and certain sounds to give that richness and that fullness. If I bring our vocal in now, and vocals are super important in these samples, let's just listen to the synth and how they interplay with the vocals. I've got 2 vocal channels here, and I'm going to go into those in a second. Space. So you can see, like, I'm dropping chords just like how Nico did in Love Is Gone. And the interesting thing also about Love Is Gone is the vocal starts before the first chord comes in, which gives us that little bit of tension before we hear that first chord. So that's a really interesting thing you can explore as well. You could maybe do like a experiment with that, see how you get on with it. So vocally, right, you can see how these 2 sounds are interplaying. Now, I had a great vocalist sing this for me. Shout out to Miracle Boom, she's dope. I processed it in another session just with some auto-tune, a little bit of compression, and then in this session put some chorus on the main vocal, just EQ, and I limited it to really like squish it down into its own little kind of sausage shape. And then I just doubled it and pitched it down by a whole octave. I used Sound Shifter to do that. I again added chorus, and then I added a little EQ again, and I blended these 2 sounds. Now, the Varispeed effect itself was going to add some extra like grit and lo-fi texture to the vocal here, and also I sent it to a bus and I put this doubler plugin on it to even like spread it out a little more, make it sound even a little bit more spacey. But with the Varispeed on now, it's quite thick, quite full, and these vocals, like, again, experiment with your Varispeeding, pitch it up, pitch it down. Sometimes I change the formant using like vocal bender. The vocals in the main synth were kind of the meat and potatoes of the sample, and then the rest was all sort of window dressing. So I added like this little sprinkle, which is a great example of call and response, something that Nami talks about all the time. Just a little sprinkle there, a different kind of textured synth. And this is another lesson. You just want to add sounds like that complement the other sounds you've got, but could maybe be something different, like a pluck. If you've got a long synth, put a pluck in, put something with like some transient in there, maybe a guitar type sound, so that you're contrasting sounds here. And this all just takes the listener on a journey, and it breaks up the monotonous sound of just the same. And you don't have to use these things much. Like, it's like almost like an ear candy that just comes in once or twice, and that little sprinkle is positioned in such a way that it just pops in when nothing else is playing. So you've got your full attention at that specific point. From bar 9, I added this lead sound in, which again I just used on the Sky keys, and the sound is hyper horn, simple sound, and I was just playing like single note melody to complement the chords, just to add something to the top. Check this out. Really easy, and at the end it just goes down. At the first bit it just goes up, and it complements the melody there. That sound is going to be the lead sound in the next section. So I'm introducing the sound before it comes in fully and takes over from the vocal as being like our main sound. That's a kind of a London Rain technique. I mean, London Rain popularized it, but it's been used in orchestration for many years. You're like teasing a sound and then it comes in, and the whole thing about this is that it doesn't feel like a loop. It feels like an organic piece of music that just keeps on developing and growing and growing and growing, and leaves the listener wanting more. So like, we'll see how this develops into a lead sound in a minute, but let's continue to work on this section first. I added a bass, and this bass is a lovely sound, and again, I'm choosing all these sounds based on them sounding kind of analog-y. I know that's a kind of weird thing to say, but I went for this Triton, which is a digital synth. But anyway, the 303 square bass, I just loved this. Now, simple waveforms like sawtooth, squares, triangle waves all work really well, because like analog synths tend to like use these waves to create their sounds. So if you use these kind of waveforms and just add little processing, sometimes RC20, whatever you want to add to it, you can really get close to that analog sound in the box. Now the bass sound, just you can hear a basic simple sound, almost got that kind of West Coast bass sound to it, with the other synths and stuff that we've looked at already, and the vocals. Couple of little simple fills, a walk up here, and then I'm just like mainly doing root notes with maybe like one or two small like approaching notes here. This is just a tone away from our target note here, so nothing to go over that I haven't really done before. I did a bit of percussion just to move the groove along, and I started the percussion with just this little tap on 2 and 4 just to keep our time, so I'll bring that in for you. But I supplemented it with these little toms. Nico uses these 808 tom sounds a lot, and to make it a little more lo-fi, I just gave it telephone EQ. Now you can do this with Decimort as well. That's Noah Shabib's favorite technique, to use Decimort just to like lo-fi stuff out, make it sound underwater, but I just used EQ in this instance. We move on to the next section. Now in Love Is Gone, there's a really big instrumental section in the middle, and a kind of a lead synth takes over, and that's what I did here as well. And I just used like notes from the F major scale really, and I walked up and down it, and I'll show you that now. Here I've made a nice space for that vocal to come back in there, and I've left a big gap where there's no vocals, which again lets the music play for a minute, lets your ears reset, and gives you something to like really like get your teeth into. It's short, but every second I'm making it count, right? So remember you've only got a few seconds to make that impression to people, so make sure like from the start it's great, and then from the next bit it's great. And I tend to keep my samples to like 45 seconds long, like no one wants to hear anymore. So we got this lovely vocal, and it kind of chops off at the end, which I like, which is like a little happy accident really, like hear that? It sounds deliberate, everything has intention, and that's what I love to say. I've left this vinyl crackle muted. It's just a vinyl crackle that sits underneath everything. And in the B section I just use this like Omnisphere mode growler bass, played root notes, changed up the lines a bit, and made the bass notes long to contrast the other section where the bass notes were really short and just bump, bump, bump. So this gives a whole feeling of like maybe the whole sample opening out, more kind of orchestral, just a different change in feeling. And then at the end of the sample we can loop perfectly back to that A section again. So guys, like if you got something out of this, please like and follow, find me on Instagram, cop some of my free mini kits, and check some of the links up in the top corner now for some more source